As I'm sure you know by now, microscopes are devices that make the very small things that are too small for us to see with our naked eye large enough for us to see by using a set of lenses. But did you know that the first microscope actually dates back to about 1609 when Galileo Galilei perfected the first device known as a microscope? Modern microscopes look quite different from Galileo's first microscope, although their function is quite similar. My goal for this video is to go through the parts of the microscope. Then I'm going to ask you to pause this video and watch two other videos. One talks about how to use the microscope, and the second one talks about using the microscope for microbiology. After that, I'm going to ask you to come back to this video so I can review using the oil immersion lens with you, and then you'll move on to staining. So let's take a look at the microscope. So this is a picture of one of the microscopes that we have at the Attleboro campus of Bristol Community College. Looking at this microscope, two of the most prominent features would be these. These are called oculars, and their job is to magnify whatever it is you're looking at by 10. Now, the microscopes that we use at Bristol are binocular, meaning they have two ocular lenses, and you're supposed to look through them with both eyes at the same time, the same way you would a pair of binoculars. Now, what's special about these oculars is that they also have something called a diopter. If your monitor is good enough, you probably see the dashed lines here that make a ring around the oculars. This allows you to independently focus your eyes for the microscope. So when you're setting down to actually focus on something, you're going to close one eye and focus on your specimen using the other eye. Then you'll open the closed eye and use the diopter to focus it. So both to focus that eye independently. So both oculars have diopters on our scopes, so that means that you could either start your focusing with the right eye or the left, whichever is most comfortable for you. But you want to remember that your oculars have a magnification of 10x. The oculars are mounted in a part of the microscope called the head, and the head, which is here, is connected to the base, which is down here, via an extension, which you see in the back, called the arm. It's also the arm that you grab when you pull a microscope out of the cabinet. So you should know that you carry a microscope by holding it with the arm and then supporting the base with your opposite hand. As we move down from the head, we get to this. This is called the rotating nose piece, and it houses the objective lenses. You're going to rotate this from left to right to move from lens to lens. The objectives are here, and there are 4 objectives. The first is called the scanning objective. It only magnifies 4 times for a total magnification of 40. I'll tell you, for microbiology, I don't find this lens to be particularly helpful, but it's good for finding your specimen across the entire slide. I find it's more useful when you're looking at eukaryotes. It's good for finding larger specimens on the slide. Adjacent to that, or next to that, you have the 10x objective. This is called your low dry objective, and when I'm looking at specimens in the micro lab, I usually start with this one. Bacteria under this lens will look kind of like colorful dust. So as you may know, bacteria are initially colorless, and we add chemicals called stains to make them have some color. So that's why I say bacteria look like colorful dust. The dust will be blue, or it could be purple or pink, could be green or red, could be black, or if we're doing a negative stain, the bacteria could look white, but it'll look like colorful dust. So what we would do is we would find our specimen using this lens. Then we'd use the coarse adjustment knob to do that. So this large knob here is the coarse adjustment knob. It moves the stage up and down in big increments. Generally, when we're starting to look at bacteria, we start with the stage in the uppermost position and then we back it down by rotating the course adjustment knob. The next objective is called the 40x objective, or the high dry objective. This allows you to make your specimen a little bit bigger. Now here's the thing about this objective. A lot of times when people are using our microscopes, they're using immersion oil. And sometimes when people aren't careful with the immersion oil, they'll actually drag the 40x lens through the immersion oil. And that immersion oil will build up on the lens, making it difficult to use. So it's perfectly okay to skip this lens if you want to and go from the 10x to the 100x directly. But you can go through the 40x if you so desire. Now our microscopes are what we call parfocal. So it's P-A-R-F-O-C-A-L, parfocal. What this means is that if you focus on your specimen using a low power lens, when you adjust to a higher power lens, your specimen should still be somewhat in focus. It may be kind of blurry, but you should only have to use the fine adjustment knob to bring your specimen into complete focus. So this fine adjustment knob is this one that's on top, right here on top of the coarse adjustment knob. And the fine adjustment knob makes small changes in focus. You may not even see the stage moving up and down when you use this knob. Next to that, you can kind of see it back here. This is the oil immersion lens. This provides 1000 total magnification, so 1000x. The lens itself is actually only 100x. But in order to use it, you must use immersion oil. This is the immersion oil that we use in our lab. Okay. All right. So we would use that to focus on our specimens. Now, as we go from the scanning objective to the oil immersion lens, the lenses actually get smaller in diameter, which means they bring in less light. So you might find that you have to turn your light up by the time you get to the oil immersion lens. I've talked about the coarse and the fine adjustment lenses. Next is the stage. And I'm sure you know the stage is just a platform that we use to support the slide or the specimen that we're looking at. So that's this platform here. We have two knobs that for our purposes, we'll just call them stage adjusters. What they do is they move the stage left and right and forwards and backwards. Well, actually they move the slide left and right, and then the stage forwards and backwards, so that you can look through the binoculars and see your specimen and then move it slowly without taking your eyes from the ocular lenses. The iris diaphragm and condenser sit just under the stage. Remember, the iris diaphragm is right here. There's like a little slider that you would slide from left to right, and it's going to adjust how much light is coming up into your specimen. The condenser lens is also in this apparatus. You can kind of see it here, part of it here. And what it does is it focuses light so that it goes through your specimen and you can see it. We have electric lights here on our microscopes that we use as a light source, and then the immersion oil. I've already mentioned it. It's only used with the 100x objective. That's the oil immersion lens. So let me explain something really quickly. When light comes out of this lamp here in the base, it doesn't just come up straight through the microscope like this, but rather some rays of light will come straight, but many of them actually go out in this direction. And as the light moves through the different lenses and the slides, it gets refracted and it fans out even more. So what the oil does in the oil immersion lens is it kind of takes the light that's coming out here from the condenser lens and it focuses it so that it goes through our specimen. like this. And so we're going to get more light so that we can see our specimen. Let me show you this slide. This is a slide, and this is the oil immersion lens, and this is the oil. So you can see it almost forms like a column between the slide and the lens to redirect that light that could be going out in these directions. It redirects them up into the lens. So now would be a good time to pause this video and go watch the next two videos in the microscope folder. They will again talk about how to focus on a specimen, even including using the oil immersion lens. And then the second video talks specifically about tips and hints for using the microscope in a microbiology lab. After you've watched those videos, come back here and we'll finish up this presentation. Okay, so now you've seen the other two videos, so hopefully you have an idea of how to use your microscope. Just a few things I want to reiterate about using the oil immersion lens. Number one, you only ever use immersion oil on the oil immersion lens because other oils can actually damage this lens, and these are expensive lenses, so we want to take care of them. The second thing is that you only use immersion oil with the 100x lens, the oil immersion lens. If you use the oil with the 40x lens, even by accident, you can damage that lens. Should you accidentally get oil on the on the 40x lens, then you need to be sure that you wash that lens off with the appropriate detergents in the lab, which I'll show you. You only ever use the fine adjustment knob with the oil immersion lens. The coarse adjustment knob changes the focus too much. It pushes the stage up and down too much. You run the risk of breaking your slide and scratching the oil immersion lens when you use the coarse adjustment knob. So we only use the fine adjustment knob. We always make sure that when we're using the oil immersion lens, the oil touches the slide and the lens. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult to actually focus on the specimen. You'll never get it in focus. So you have to have oil. When you're using this lens, you want to make sure you always clean this lens last. So good technique with a microscope is to always clean all of your lenses before you start your experiment. Always make sure that the oil immersion lens is last because we don't want to smear the immersion oil on any of the other lenses. Last one that I don't have on this slide is to make sure that your slide is actually face up. For some reason, well, it has to do with the depth of focus, but very often in micro, especially when we're first getting started, people will accidentally put their slides upside down on the microscope, and they can focus on their specimen using the low power objective and using the high power objective, but when they get to the oil immersion lens, they can't focus. It's because the depth of focus on this lens is so short, you can't see the specimen on the other side of the slide. So if you're having trouble focusing, be sure that there's enough oil on your slide and make sure that your slide is face up. So those are some tips and hints. The best way to learn about microscopy for microbiology is to actually do it. So I look forward to seeing you in the lab and practicing and learning this important skill.